Let's now turn it over to our colleague, Bill Velasco.
Thanks, Boyet and Dennis. You know, on Round by Round, we talk a lot about professional boxing because of all the activity that's going on around in the world. Pero ngayon, nais ko namang pag-usapan yung mga problema sa amateur boxing. There are a lot of things that can and cannot be fixed in the world of amateur boxing. And let's go over the problems one by one. First of all, for a lot of boxers around the world, the amateurs are just a stepping stone. Kumbaga, kailangan lang talagang pagdaanan para makarating sa professional boxing. Kaya hindi masyadong pinahahalagahan ng mga boksingero mismo. Kailangan lang nilang maging matagumpay ng konti para makalusot na sa amateur boxing at maging professional kung saan sila kikita ng malaki. Problem number 2, the International Boxing Association or AIBA was so bad for so long. Anong ibig sabihin natin? Imagine, it's been 25 years since Onyok Velasco was cheated out of an Olympic gold medal in Atlanta. And prior to that and well after that, so many great boxers were cheated during competitions. And that is primarily because AIBA favors countries that are their donors or give money to them. Kaya yan po ang isang malaking problema ng amateur boxing na alam na ng tao na pag pumasok kayo sa amateur boxing sa international competition, malamang sa hindi magkakaroon ng dayaan. The reason why the Philippines did so well in the last Tokyo Olympics is because AIBA was taken out of the equation when they lost their right to conduct the Olympic boxing tournament back in 2019 because of precisely this history of very poor outcomes in the fights themselves. In fact, an investigation by a third party contracted by AIBA itself showed that in 2016 in the Rio Olympics, there was some match fixing that was taking place. Problem number 3, the headgear and the uniforms obscure or homogenize the boxers. Anong ibig sabihin nito? Una, lahat ng boksingero noon may suot na headgear at lahat, kung hindi pula, asul ang uniforme. You could never see the faces of the boxers and you don't know if today he'll be wearing red or tomorrow he'll be wearing blue, which is why everything looked so generic from a viewer standpoint that they couldn't really differentiate the boxers, especially if you were somebody new watching amateur boxing. Luckily, that has since been changed, but it's already created the habit for many people to not watch international amateur boxing. Next problem. Non-Olympic tournaments are quite obscure. In fact, if the news did not come out a couple of weeks ago that the Philippines did not participate in the World Championships, we would not even know that there were World Championships in this country. Kaya, ang problema po dyan, maraming international tournaments nagaganap, pero hindi po nalalaman ng mga tao. One reason for this is a lot of them are in obscure European countries which really love amateur boxing. So the mainstream media does not really send people there to cover these events, and thus very few people really know about it until well after the fact. Problem number 5, some pros skip amateur tournaments. Gaya na sinabi ko kanina, para sa mga ibang boksingero, hindi na nila kailangan maging amateur dahil gusto na nilang kumita kaagad. Maraming boksingerong naging professional habang teenager pa lamang. Mike Tyson himself tried out for the US Olympic team, but his style was deemed quote-unquote too professional, and he was not admitted into the US Olympic team, although he did savagely beat Tyrell Biggs, who was the eventual US Olympic gold medal winner in the heavyweight division. So for a lot of boxers, it is an unnecessary step. A lot of international amateur tournaments don't really attract them. Kaya hindi sila pumapasok sa amateur, dumidiretso sila sa professional boxing. Problem number 6 is pros will not compete even now. Sinabi ng AIBA dahil namumroblema na nga sila na ang mga professional pwede nang lumahok sa mga international Olympic tournaments or sa Asian Games, SEA Games at sa ibang continental championships. But pros will not compete in amateur competitions. 1, they refuse to be judged by amateur judges. And 2, unlike in pros where you're only weighed once, in international amateur tournaments, you may have to make weight every day, which means that a pro boxer will have to fight in a higher weight division against much younger opponents in much shorter fights. Very, very dangerous for professionals, especially those who are used to long fights. So why would you bother to put yourself in that situation when you could, one, potentially get hurt, and two, lose millions of dollars in income? Problem number 7. The cultures in a lot of these countries are very, very different. Anong ibig nating sabihin? There are a lot of countries where amateur boxing is a big deal, and there are a lot of countries where amateur boxing is not a big deal. In Europe and in communist countries like Cuba, for example, amateur boxing is a very, very big deal. Guillermo Rigondeaux had more than 400 amateur bouts before he turned professional, and it's very rare for a Cuban boxer to become a professional. Dahil yun po ang kultura nila. In Europe, in a lot of sports, they can flip-flop between being a pro and being an amateur just to join the Olympics. But in boxing, you cannot do that because, again, the rules are very, very different. Kaya yan po ang sitwasyon ng kultura ng boxing. Halimbawa, dito sa atin sa Pilipinas, the amateur boxers, compete in a lot of international tournaments until they inevitably turn pro. In some countries, they never turn pro. And that is something that the Western countries have not really copied. And last, problem number 8. Even though the International Olympic Committee has stepped in and has really told AIBA to shape up or to be permanently removed from the Olympics, they cannot fix AIBA. Why? Because the IOC is mainly an organizing body. They do not have people of their own. In fact, the Tokyo Olympic Boxing Tournament was conducted by an ad hoc committee which was headed by a Japanese gymnastics official. So basically, they were pulling people wherever they could to put together the Olympic tournament. And granted that it was much more fair than previous tournaments, ang problema naman po doon is hindi niyo naman magagawa yun ng tuloy-tuloy. And how do you fix everything at the Asian level, at the European level, at the other continental levels, and at the Southeast Asian level? Yun po ang problema. So now, if AIBA does not fix itself, there's a distinct possibility that in the 2024 Olympics, there may be no boxing. At yan po ang mga problema sa amateur boxing.